Our first huge event of the year for One Championship is now in the books, 1165 that went down this past weekend. This video is a little bit late, actually, I'll be honest. I had plans to record this on Sunday, but if you, like me, you're a pro wrestling fan, so you'd stayed up for the Royal Rumble and then woken up Sunday morning for this one card. It was a struggle, and it's taken me a few days to recover actually from it, so that is why this video is happening now and not earlier in the week. So I do apologise, but also I understand that this card was on pay-per-view. It was £30 here in the UK, which is quite expensive, I think, and so I'm sure there would have been people that were tempted to watch this card and maybe didn't. Maybe they didn't realise even that it was on pay-per-view. I did have one person reach out on Twitter when I posted about this card, saying, you know, why is it not on Sky Sports? Can't find it on Sky Sports. So I understand that is a little bit confusing, so I thought this video might still be worth putting out there anyway, just in case. And also there was a lot of talking points to come out of this card, right? It was a stacked event. You had pretty much a big name in each fight, or at least a top 5 ranked fighter as well, for you know, some of those lower fights where the names don't necessarily jump off the card. For people that are more casual One Championship fans, they would have seen, you know, the ranking number next to some of these guys, and you know, every fight felt like there was something at stake, which I absolutely loved this card because of that, although as we will get into, a lot of those fights didn't necessarily deliver the greatest of watches. Let's talk about it. This is the highs and lows. I do have some that kind of fit into both, but we will get to that when we get there, if that makes sense. We will start with the best thing about this card, the thing that everyone knew would be the best thing about this card. The most obvious talking point is, of course, the main event where Superlek defended his one flyweight kickboxing world championship against Takeru Sagawa. I had said in my preview of this card that just watching Takeru walk out in front of a One Championship, well, in front of the Japanese fans in One Championship was absolutely incredible to witness, and the fight absolutely delivered. I'd said about Superlek in the build-up to this fight about how he might not have the same kind of profile of a Takeru or a Rodtang, but he is just as deserving of that, and he proved it with his performance, I thought, against Takeru, which started incredibly well. The leg kicks, of course, were a huge part for Superlek. I do think he took his foot off the gas a little bit. He kind of... he didn't really do the same in the Rodtang fight, but obviously that was a 3-rounder, so it was very, very different in terms of the pacing. But I did feel like that third round against Rodtang, he was kind of hanging on a little bit, but he still managed to land some very effective stuff, which I believe I scored that third round for him. I can't remember how that fight exactly played out round by round, but he did take his foot off the gas a little bit, I think, and Takeru found a way back in. That third round flurry that got the fans out of their seats was absolutely phenomenal, and I think that, you know, the third round and the championship rounds really gave the opportunity for Takeru to, you know, put a good foot forward, make a great account of himself. Even though he did lose the fight, I did still have Superlek winning that fight. But I thought that Takeru, you know, played his part in what was an incredible fight, of course. And I suppose coming out of that, the main talking points would be Superlek, what is next for him? I think he's the best in the world right now, I think. And, you know, maybe Chingizalazov in that conversation too, of course. But I would say Superlek right now. And what is next for him? I'm not too sure, honestly. I think for me, it depends on what Takeru does next. Because I would love to see him fight one more time. I know that it kind of sounded like he was done after that fight with Superlek. I would love to see the Rodtang fight be put together for another Japanese event later on down in the year, once Rodtang's healthy. I think that, you know, it would be crazy if we don't get that fight, even with Takeru coming off of a loss and Rodtang coming off of a loss to Superlek, we should point out. So I think the fact that they're both coming off losses to the same guy is kind of like, well, you know, let's find out who the second best guy is right now. And also that fight is just huge. So I really, really hope we get that. If we don't get that, if Takeru is done, then I think you can do Superlek versus Rodtang again. Hopefully over 5 rounds this time. Maybe do it for Rodtang's title this time around. I know that, you know, Superlek didn't defend his title against Rodtang because he missed weight, which was a huge shame. But I think that Superlek has earned the right to challenge for that Muay Thai title. So that would be where I would go with that. To talk about the biggest low point, I think, of this card, it would be a fight that we didn't actually get to see happen, and that would be Sage Northcutt not fighting Shinya Aoki. Now, I don't put the blame too much on Sage Northcutt here. It might sound like I am, but he, of course, put out a statement saying that his corner had been denied visas to get into Japan, and he had done the whole training camp with those coaches, and he didn't, feel comfortable fighting Shinya Aoki with that in mind, right? One Championship did offer to replace his corner with a elite grappler, they said, something like that. I wonder if that would have been one of the two Ruotolo brothers. Obviously, Cade would have been competing in the matchup next, so maybe Tai would have cornered him or something like that. I don't know. They said grappling world champion, so I just assumed it would be somebody who was on the card, maybe. But obviously, with Cade competing next, probably unlikely. But Tai, maybe. I was really excited for this fight. I wasn't too up on it on my preview, but as it got closer, I was like, this could actually be a very interesting test for Sage. And we, of course, didn't get it. Sage, his run in One Championship has been mental. Like, every time I write a story on Sage, that feels like there is so much background to get to before you can even talk about what's next, of course, with the 4-year hiatus, and then having the fight with Shinya booked, and then it not happening, and then it being booked and not happening again because of this scenario. And for a lot of people, I know that Sean Sheehan, if you don't watch his previews for these events, they are fantastic. And he didn't know that this had happened until John Lineker, was making the walk. And I think that was the same for a lot of people. They didn't totally make it clear during the card that this is what had happened. And if you weren't paying attention to social media, which I wasn't at the time because I was a little bit behind on the card, I was kind of catching up, you didn't know that Sage had pulled out of the fight. So we didn't get that fight, and in the end we got Shinya versus John Lineker. I think, one deserves huge credit for managing to keep Shinya on the card. John and Shinya deserve incredible credit for taking this fight on an hour's notice, which is mental, but the fight itself, John Lineker's a bantamweight. Shinya Aoki's a very, very good grappler. He took him down and dominated him on the ground and got the submission in the first round. So it's kind of there isn't really a whole lot to say there. It's cool for Shinya to get a win in front of the Japanese fans. I wonder if that will be the last one for him. Do they rebook the Sage fight? I had said in my preview for this card that rebooking the Sage fight in the first place for this card felt a little bit like, do we really need to see it at this stage? I think that it would probably feel the same way, but then, who knows? Shinya just coming off of a dominant win over a former world champion, so maybe we get it again. I'm not too sure. I have put Cade Ruotolo's grappling matchup with Tommy Langacker into the good category. I think you could also argue that it's a bad thing, but I'm going to highlight it as good because of Cade's performance. Let's get the low out of the way first, and that is, I think, that Cade's grappling style, obviously his brother Ty's grappling style as well, it being so output orientated, right? They just chain submission attacks against their opponents, and it kind of leaves their opponents playing defensive for the whole matchup. Whilst I think that from the Ruotolo standpoint, it does make for an exciting watch because they are pushing the action and not stalling at all, and they deserve a ton of credit for that because there aren't many people cut from that same cloth in submission grappling these days. But at the same time, it makes the rest of the division look weak, and I know that that's a strange thing to pin on Cade, but it's true. I think Tommy Langacker is a very, very good opponent, and I thought that this matchup would be closer than the first time, and it kind of wasn't. Cade just did the same thing he always does and just chain submission attacks, and Tommy could never really find an opportunity to threaten with any of his own. He, of course, did get the catch, which meant that Cade got the decision win. So, it's kind of like when you get a really dominant UFC champion like John Jones at light heavyweight or George St. Pierre at welterweight, when those guys are so good that it makes the rest of the division not look that good because they're not even competitive when they do get a title shot. And it just kind of, I think it does impact the excitement for some of these matchups, because I think finding an opponent for Cade is going to be very, very difficult because we are going to run into this problem time and time again where they just get absolutely blitzed by Cade for the whole 10 minutes and you go, oh, well, that was a bit of a waste of time, but congratulations to Cade Ruotolo. Also, in the negatives, I will put the fight between Itsuki Hirata and Ayaka Miura. Now, I think that, again, kind of like the Cage situation, you could also put this in good because I thought Ayaka Miura looked very, very good. She was able to control the fight from start to finish with her grappling and didn't seem to get tired either. Now, I also think that the reason she didn't get too tired is I just didn't feel like Itsuki Hirata did a whole lot in this fight. She got into some bad positions and some awkward positions and then wasn't able to fight out of it, but also I don't think tried super hard to get out of them after the first round. The second and third rounds just kind of seemed to float by her. And I was a bit disappointed because I thought that that I was expecting her to bounce back from that loss to Hamseo Hee and show some developments in her game, and I still feel like some of the flaws that Hamseo Hee exposed against Hirata are still there, and that is, you know, kind of changing the momentum of a fight once it isn't going her way. Also in the bad, I have put Nikki Holskin, I say bad, lows, whatever you want to call it, I've put Nikki Holskin's mixed rule super fight with Sexyama. As soon as this matchup was announced, I was like, that is bizarre, but I'm into it. But the big question that I'd spoken about with a few people was why you were having 2 rounds of striking before we got to MMA, right? Usually, if we look at Rodtang and DJ, for example, you had Muay Thai and then MMA. And so all that DJ had to do was get through 1 round of striking, and then the fight changes to his world. And then if Rodtang can survive that, it goes back to him, right? But you had boxing, Muay Thai, then MMA, which just puts a clear advantage to Nikki Holskin, right? He's got 2 rounds of striking to finish a 48-year-old veteran before he can start to look for takedowns. And look, Nikki Holskin's performance was good. He did what he did. His boxing looked clean. He's a legendary kickboxer. Of course his boxing looked good, right? This is the problem. Yeah, Nikki Holskin did his job, but did you ever think that he wasn't going to do his job when he's fighting Akiyama in 2 rounds of striking? No. It was bizarre. And you know, it was a bit of a tough one to watch towards the end because Holskin was just landing everything he threw, and it seemed like it was just a matter of time before we ended up with a fight that everyone went, can't watch this anymore. So it did get stopped in that first round. I'm glad it never got to Muay Thai because I think it would have got worse for Akiyama before it got better. But yeah, that fight, yeah, it was a weird one, and instead of it being a weird one that you watch and you're like, oh, this is fascinating, it was kind of like, it's just never really got to the point where it could be interesting because it's so one-sided in the boxing range. One of the biggest highs of this card, Gary Tonon submitting Martin Nguyen in that first round. A fantastic win for Gary Tonon. He is undoubtedly the #1 featherweight contender. He will, of course, challenge the winner of Tang Kai versus Tan Lee when they do their title unification fight in the near future. And I just, you know, it was Gary Tonon being Gary Tonon, right? He got the takedown, and then from there on, you're like, this is going to be either a tough round for Martin Nguyen or the end of the fight, right? You are not getting back to your feet once Gary Tonon has got you in that position. The back take was fantastic, and then, you know, when he gets the back take, it's over. Probably his biggest win to date under the One Championship banner, I would say, Gary Tonon. Martin Nguyen, I know that he was, you know, he hasn't really been the same Martin Nguyen that won 2 world championships, became the first ever champ in one, but also, you know, former champion, of course. And I actually, you know, as I said in my preview, I thought it was actually quite a tough matchup for Tonon in some ways. I thought Nguyen could maybe cause him some issues, a bit like Tan Lee did, just because of his power and composure, but Gary Tonon didn't leave any chance for that to happen. You know, he didn't go for any super risky submission attacks like he did against Tan Lee. Just got the takedown, got the back, and got the choke, and you can't ask for much more. And another one of the highs, one of the better fights on this card, was Murat Grigorian versus Sittichai, where they faced off for the 6th time. First time in one championship, though, I believe. And this was a really, really fun striking contest. You know, probably the second best fight on the card, I would say, outside of the main event. I thought Sitchitai started fantastic in that first round, and then Grigorian just made some really, really good adjustments. And by adjustments, I mean, he was like, I'm just going to get in your face even more than I already am and make you fight me in a phone box. And I thought for some of that period, it wasn't really working for him. I thought Sitchitai was doing a really, really good job of fighting up close and personal with him, but you know, the reason that Gregorian did it is because he's got some serious power in those hands, and he did seem to be able to get to Sichitai early on, and it was just like, you know, slightly timing was off or missed by an inch or something like that, and he was kind of getting there. It felt like he was going to get there, and then he did in that third round, and he put Sichitai away, and that was a great fight. And Gregorian, you know, I know he's been asked about fighting Chingiz again, or fighting Superbon even, and you know, I wouldn't really be too keen on seeing the Gregorian fight straight away, the Chingiz Alazov fight rather, because of how dominant Alazov was last time out. I mean, that speaks to how absolutely incredible Chingiz Alazov right now, that he was able to shut out Gregorian for pretty much the whole 5-round fight. So yeah, I suppose you can put that in the highs as well. Just how good is Chingiz Alazov? Very, very good, if you didn't know already. And the only other thing I think really to speak about would be the opening run of fights that I think didn't really deliver. I will give a special mention though to Danny Kingad, who took on Yuya Wakamatsu. That fight was very, very good. I thought Yuya Wakamatsu looked very, very good actually. That fight was good. But the others that kind of opened the prelim portion, if you didn't tune into that, there wasn't really a whole lot to write home about. Like I said, the Danny Kingad and Wakamatsu fight was good. Opacic taking on Azizpour was okay. I mean, Opacic has probably earned himself a title shot, so you can't really blame him for that. But the fight never really got, you know, too interesting. I thought it was quite a solid win for Opacic, and you know, not one that I'll be going back to in the future per se. And then the first two fights, this was especially true. Gustavo Ballart taking on Hiroba Minowa, and then you had Bokang Massanyane taking on Keito Yamakita, which, yeah, those two fights, very, very grappling heavy, but not super progressive grappling. You know, fairly convincing wins by both men, but yeah, not super interesting, and definitely not vital ones to go back and watch. I would say that if you haven't watched this card and you're thinking about going back and buying the pay-per-view to watch it back, then, you know, definitely, you know, do go back for Danny Kingad and Wakamatsu. I believe that's on YouTube. You can watch that for free, the prelim portion. But, you know, from there, the real highlights, of course, were Gary Tonon's submission win over Martin Nguyen. Morant Gregorian versus Sichitai, definitely worth going back for. And the main event, Superlek versus Takeru. And considering how many big fights we had on this card, you would expect maybe a few more highlights. But there kind of wasn't any like crazy finishes or anything like that. Like I said, Gregorian's knockout and Tonon's submission were both very good, but, you know, nothing crazy to write home about. And that is just about it for 1165. Let me know what you guys thought of this card. Did you watch it live? Did you struggle to make it through it like I did with the Royal Rumble the night before? Were you a little bit disappointed like I was watching Cody Rhodes win the Royal Rumble again? But hey, that is a different topic for a totally different channel, to be honest, so we won't get into that. And yeah, thank you for checking out this video. Drop a subscribe, drop a like, all that good stuff, and I will see you very, very soon for some more One content. And yeah, peace.